Hello and welcome back to the page. I'm your host, Ashriel Moore, the ambassador of the African Diaspora Collective right here in Israel. As per usual, I want to continue to expose you to the various communities of African ancestry right here in Israel, giving you a pretty good all-around look. The good, the bad, the ugly, the in-between, so that you can be able to really be exposed to these communities, because most people have no idea that we even exist in Israel. And so I know you want the tea. I know you want the tea, because a lot of people have been asking, how do the African Hebrew Israelite community, the largest concentration of African Americans outside of America, the largest concentration of Israelites in any place in the world that repatriated from America back to Israel, how have you all been treated since arriving to Israel? And so I'm going to try and give you, in a matter of a few minutes, a history from 1968 until 2025. Y'all ready? Let's go. The first members that arrived in 1968 to Israel were actually received under the then Law of Return that was legislated in 1950. The Law of Return in 1950 said that you are welcome. This country had been established for all of those who are Israelites, who are Jews, who have any connection to the house of Israel, who have affinity. You are welcome to return home. This is what it said. And so we then came under that law. We said that we were part of the house of Israel, those Israelite tribes that had migrated and then were taken into the Western Hemisphere and enslaved. So now we're coming back home. So you established a state. You said that this is for everybody who wants to come back home. So we came back home. Initially, they were received. The first people were actually given legal status in Israel. The first one that had come in 1968 was sent to Kibbutz Ma'abarot. That was a settlement called Ma'abarot, where he went through the process of being absorbed in the Ulpan and otherwise to study Hebrew. The second group that had come in 1969, 1970, they also were received under the Law of Return. But this specific group, because it was a large group, Israel didn't necessarily know what to do with them. Why? Because prior to their arrival, there was never a group of people that were of this skin hue, sub-Saharan African people, who were coming back home and claiming to be of the tribes of Israel. The only thing that they had knew were those who had claimed to be of the tribes of Israel from Europe, Jews, and those who were from North Africa and from the Arabian countries who they called Mizrahim, and those whose families were exiled from Spain who they called Sfaradim. And even they were having a hard time with receiving them, with accepting them, because they were saying that there's a cultural gap. There's a big cultural difference between these two peoples. And so they were not really fans of these other groups like that. So they were having a hard time with being in Israel, with being accepted. And that's why in the 1970s there arose a group called the Black Panthers of Israel, whose purpose was to fight against the oppression that they were experiencing at the hands of the Ashkenazi European Jews in Israel. And so when we came, it was like, oh, we thought that these were the darker ones, but you all are like jet black people, dark people, some lighter as well, saying that you're from the house of Israel, from the tribes of Israel. We never knew about anything that had to, and back then you didn't have internet. So you couldn't be able to just jump in and Google and find all type of scholars who have been on this information for a long time, because there were no people who were really focusing on Africans as being part of the house of Israel. I mean, that as far as they were concerned, us? No, absolutely not. So it took them a little time, but then they let us in. Then they gave us also the benefits of New Orleans. We were given apartments and then, some small trinkets or whatever to try to adjust to the new life in Israel. But then other groups started coming later in the 1970s. This is where things got a bit tricky. But after that second large group had come in 1970, they said, okay, we have to change the Law of Return in 1970. This new Law of Return will give a specific and clear definition as to what we define as Jews, which would be you were either born to a Jewish mother or you were converted and you were not subscribing to any other religions. And so this then cut us out of the picture, because we were coming from America, where we had been enslaved for 400 plus years. We didn't have any of these documentations to be able to prove, based on these new criteria, that we belong to the house of Israel. Besides the fact that we are Israelites who were pre-exilic Israelites, we held on to the first temple laws and customs and traditions. And as far as we were concerned, the lineage did not pass through the mother. The lineage was a patrilineal lineage. And so, I mean, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the patriarchs of the nation, wasn't the matriarchs of the nation. And so, as far as we were concerned, I mean, this was something that we weren't able to prove. We couldn't show that based on what they were asking for. And so then that began a political issue with us, because now all of those who had been provided legal status, that legal status was revoked. Then we effectively became illegal residents in Israel from 1970s onward. Now, obviously, in order to do this, you would have to justify by some ways, by some means, somehow. I mean, you couldn't just revoke people's legal status and then say that they're illegal and now you want to deport them out of Israel, because obviously, this will cause mayhem worldwide. So they had to concoct something. And what did they concoct? They said, okay, well, these people had come to Israel illegally and stayed and overstayed their visas and then never left. And so as a result of that, then they're illegal residents in Israel. And so they have to be kicked out. So you had processes of deportation in 1971, 1973 and onward. But we maintained our identity. We said that we are who we are, and we have come home, and we're going to live in our homeland again. We're going to establish what we had come to establish, which was the long-awaited kingdom of God on earth. That long-awaited kingdom of God on earth, based on Daniel 2:44, was to be a foundation for a society that was built on the principles, right, that we identify, or those attributes that we identify as belonging to God. God is love. God is peace. God is truth. God is family. God is omnipresent. God is omnipotent. God is justice. So we wanted to simply establish a community that would be all of what I've just mentioned now in practice. We call it spirituality in practice, where you could be able to see these things actually taking place 101 live. This is what it looks like to live in accordance with these principles. And so we said we were going to do that. So we had a political issue going. We were rejected then. The media was against us. The government institutions were against us. The governments were against us. We were rejected. We were disallowed from having any access, prevented any access to any of the Israeli institutions. Not the medical institutions, not the educational institutions, not the welfare institutions, no permits to work, no ability to be able to travel because we didn't have any documentation. So we were just stateless people just residing here in Israel, living our lives. Didn't have access to anything, but we had to make do. So we created a community then that will allow us, because we were being rejected, that will allow us to be able to establish everything that we need internally. So we establish our own internal governmental structure. And we establish our own offices that are dealing with specific things for the community's members. We establish our own ministries inside the community. We establish our own institutions that will be able to provide the necessities for the community, like a school for our children, like a birthing center where we could be able to deliver our own children, like being able to grow our own foods, like incubators for business development. We lived in a cooperative kibbutz type of way, which is basically everybody give according to what they're able to give, but they receive according to what they need. This was the cooperative living idea that we had implemented to be able to ensure that nobody's being left behind. We wasn't subscribing to those other capitalistic ideas that you're on your own. Everybody have to make it on their own. it's a rough life out here. It's a wild, it's a hard knock life. We didn't subscribe to those things. We were looking out for everybody. All for one, and one for all was the motto, and still remains the motto until this very day. Everything came to a really tough and rough boiling point in 1986, in April, wherein the Israeli government and the police force raided an orange packaging center where members of the community were actually working in Rehovot. Took 46 members of the community from there to jail in preparation for deportation out of Israel. And one of the women that were taken there was an elderly sister who was taken in her pajamas. She had to be in her 60s, who was taken from her bed at 2 o'clock in the morning in her pajamas to the Abu Kabir prison. Now, mind you, this is one of the prisons in Israel for people who are, major offenders. They were taken there because, they were just here in Israel, illegally, as they say.
1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, we was asleep, and when they woke us up, we were surrounded all around where we was working at. We were surrounded with police, and they just picked us up in our night clothes. Didn't give us time to get dressed and nothing. Just said, come on and go with us. And when they picked us up, they took us to jail, and we sang and shouted all night long. They were the ones that picked us up and brought us upstairs. When he's going downstairs, I heard him say we would be leaving Brookabia in the morning, being deported. Next morning come, I was laying there, and the little windows where we was laying, the little windows was just about like that. I could see a little daylight. I said, hallelujah, thank God, we still here. I was so happy.
They didn't knock, they just bust in the door. And we were all laying there asleep. So when they bust in, it was very exciting. They just turned on the light all of a sudden. And we jumped up in the bed. Didn't know that I was going to the police station. Didn't have no idea where I was going. So they tied my hand like this and brought me on out.
And so that then caused a boiling point to a point where we had prepared to march to Jerusalem. And the day that we had prepared to march to Jerusalem, the Israeli forces then came and surrounded the community and were prepared to do whatever is necessary to prevent us from being able to exercise our rights to be able to go out and to protest and to march to Jerusalem during the period of the Passover, which is usually one of the days where every Jew, Israelite is directed to actually walk up to Jerusalem, to go up to Jerusalem to make an offering. All right, we were prevented from being able to do so, and so at that point, then we had to go on the offense in terms of our legal battles here in Israel to be able to get recognition, which we began to do. And in 1989, 1990, we then were given temporary residency status based on agreements that were made between the Israeli government, the American government, and the community. And then going forward, then we had the ability now to start working legally. And in 1994, we actually established a school for ourselves, an actual edifice for ourselves to be able to allow our children now to be educated in a school, because prior to that, our school was wherever we could be able to find a little corner to sit. That's how we were taught. That's how the children were actually taught. You had to improvise. Wherever you're able to do it, that's what we do it. That's what we done it. In the 1990s, things had become a bit better. During this period of time then, we had started bringing a lot of celebrities and other people to come and to assess the lives of the community to see what we had built here. You know, it was still amazing. Even though we were being rejected, we still managed to build a proper community that could be a foundation for black communities wherever they are in the world, to show what we're capable of doing by us coming together, by us uniting, by us having one idea, one plan, one desire. So we brought a lot of people up to visit and to see what it is that we have been doing. I mean, people were coming also in the 1970s and 80s, but in the 1990s, that's when things had really started to take off. And even during that period of time, now that we had more access to the society, right, then we began to develop businesses. We began to develop other things that we could be able to now use as means for profiting or for gaining funds for the continual building and expanding of the community itself. We also had extensions of the community in other places in the world that will also assist us by sending up funds from those places to Israel so that we can be able to obviously continue to maintain ourselves. But it wasn't easy because the Israeli governmental institutions were always very much against us, very anti the community. It wasn't necessarily like that with the Israeli society. Most people were not even aware of the community, and the people who were aware of the community, they just believed that we were a very nice, peaceful, loving community, and so they were desirous of just, of living in harmony with us. Most people, even in the 1990s, late 2000s, they believed that we had legal status in Israel, which we did not for all this period of time. I mean, they just knew we were pure citizens of Israel because in the 1970s we were moving around Israel and singing. You had the New World Gospel Choir, and otherwise we were very much known in Israel. So people were, I mean, as far as they were concerned, it was obvious that we had legal status in Israel, which we actually didn't. But we were continuing to live our lives. We had established everything that we needed internally, so we would not have to be dependent on any external sources for our living, right? And then in 2003, we then received permanent residency status. Well, the process for the permanent residency status actually started, wherein now we could actually have proper work permits. In addition to, the work permits that every now and then you would have to go and to renew. Now we would have proper work permits. Now we would be able to have identification documents. Now we were permanently stationed here in Israel. We wouldn't have to leave and then come back and then all of those things. But still internally, there were still issues because the Ministry of Interior and other institutions did not necessarily finish the entire process. So there were still people who were actually left behind. And as a result of that, these people who were left behind still didn't have the proper status that some of the other people did have. And so what we did was the people who had status, they had to continue to carry the weight for the rest of the people who didn't necessarily have legal status in Israel. Now, I'm giving you the history of 50 plus years, so obviously I'm not going to be able to go deep into everything, but we'll continue to share more with you. And so in the late 2000s, we then began to, or 2004, 2005, we then began to enlist in the IDF. The reason for our enlistment into the IDF was that we were saying it's our responsibility to protect and to defend our homeland in the midst of those people who are trying to not only destroy the land, but to destroy everybody who are also residing in the land, who are also, we're part of those people. So it's us, and there's Arabs, and there's other Jews, and there's foreigners, and there's Druze, and there's Bedouins, and there's Afro-Palestinians, and there's, so all of us are residing here. So obviously, as far as we're concerned, we're going to carry part of that mantle for the defense of the land, which is also defending our community within Israel. And so in 2014, the Minister of Interior, Gideon Sa'ar, then determined or decided that all of those whose families had actually, or all those children who had served in the military and whose families had served in the military, they then would be able to be eligible for full Israeli citizenship. And that's what brought us to the point of full Israeli citizenship. But in 2003, Ariel Sharon had written a letter to Tom Lantos in America saying that he could be assured that all members of the community were receiving 100% Israeli citizenship, which was absolutely very much untrue. But as far as we were concerned, we were doing everything that's necessary to be able to sustain ourselves without any assistance from the outside. And so when you ask, how have we been faring? Well, we, considering the circumstances, we've been faring pretty good. doing for ourselves. But we didn't receive too much assistance, and we received a cold shoulder, and we received a lot of resistance from the Israeli government and the Israeli governmental institutions until this very day. Because these governments, and it's not just this government today, they've been discriminating against us. It has nothing to do with the fact that they don't consider us as Jews, because there are a lot of other communities that are also like the Beit El community that also arrived to Israel in the 1960s. German Christians who had said that God had given them a revelation to return to Israel. They had been received pretty much without an issue. So it wasn't a matter of us not being Jews. It wasn't a matter of us being illegally in Israel, because you had hundreds of thousands of other illegal people, mainly coming from Eastern Europe, who were illegal in Israel, but they were not being chased out of Israel. So all of these things were very much irrelevant. It was a matter of color. It was a matter of race. It was a matter of them not being able to, first of all, to fully understand the community. Secondly, not interested in fully understanding the community. But third of all, not being able to dictate for us who and what we are, and we just get in line with that. We were not having that. We stood on, and we continue to stand on who we actually are, what our responsibility is, and is very much different from what they would like for us to align ourselves with. And so it was very important that we maintain our identity. It was very important that we maintain the customs and traditions that are unique to us as a community. And so during this period of time that we maintained these things, we also started to export a lot of that to the wider Israeli society through our songs, right? What we call songs of deliverance. So they can be able to have an inside scope, an inside look by listening to the lyrics of our songs to understand who we actually are. We exported our lifestyle in terms of our vegan lifestyle, our vegan consumption of vegan foods. No dairy, no eggs, no fish, no animal byproducts. Full 100% vegan. And then we also exported a lot of our customs in the school. Like, for example, we had uniforms. In the school, uniform. Let's have all the children in uniforms. We also had other businesses internally, right? That were developing in the community another level of style, right? When we talk about the garments and things like that we actually wear, and a lot of these things, these are just a few examples, of course, but a lot of these things were actually adopted then by the greater Israeli society. And then Israel became, based on the vegan food that we had been producing and providing, became the vegan capital of the world, Tel Aviv being the vegan capital of the world. That was something that we had initiated from here, right? From the community. The songs, right? They have a jazz festival, have a blues festival. They have, this didn't exist beforehand, but we were the ones who had brought this music to the forefront. And still until this very day, the New World Gospel Choir, which it was called then, but now it's the Fire Choir, we were the ones who had brought these things into mainstream. And then we had people also that represented Israel in the Eurovision in 1999 and in 2006 as well. We've had other members of the community who also participated in song contests and stuff throughout the years. We've taken some of our health regimens also into institutions like colleges and otherwise to share with them this lifestyle and how this actually works. And so now you have at least 10,000 people a year coming to visit our community in Dimona to learn about, from within Israel, of course, to learn about our customs, our traditions, who we are, because we've been standing on that. Inside of the IDF, inside the military, right? There was no such concept, there was no such thing as vegan food or awareness about veganism or awareness about Hebrew Israelites. But today, when you register, when you're at, when you're going through the first initial phase of induction into the military, they ask you, what are you? This, and this, or Hebrew Israelite, right? That's in there. They recognize the fact that we observe the high holy days and the Sabbath day and otherwise. So they have an exemption for us from not needing to be on base during that period of time. They have special uniforms that are not made from polyester, because they understand that we don't dress in that manner. Only 100% fabrics. They have boots that are what they call vegan boots, that are not made from leather, to be able to adjust to our identity or our customs. And so, yeah, these things have now been accepted, and we continue to expand. We continue to bring our culture, our traditions, our identity to the forefront, right? And we're proud of it. It hasn't been the easiest, but we've stood on what we are and who we are, and we continue to maintain that until this very day. And so how we been faring? We've experienced a whole array of things, but it's been us who've been determining for ourselves that we're going to remain on course, and we have done that until this very day, and we've been successful at it. So thank you very much for continuing to follow. Please leave a comment. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then, you have a great day.